Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. That is pretty mad considering I've only been doing this for a month.
Still a rookie.
To celebrate, I'm going to be giving away a very exclusive book which some people sell for over $100 on eBay. And that is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid, the Illumicrate edition. And this giveaway is going to be international. This book is signed, has beautiful sprayed edges, and my favorite part is definitely the dust jacket. Just look at that. How beautiful is that? To enter, you must simply subscribe and write in the comments how many questions I answer in this video. If you answer correctly, then you'll be in the draw to win this beautiful book. Just to make it clear, each time you see a new username on the screen, then that counts as one question. Sometimes I'll be having 2 questions on the screen or maybe 3 at the same time, and I will consider that as 2 questions or 3 questions, just to make it a bit easier to understand. And yes, I am forcing you to watch the whole video. Are you mad?
So mad!
In this video, I'm going to be answering some questions you had for me on Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. Let's get into it. The first question is, what made you want to start doing YouTube? Thank you for that question. Well, basically, I was starting to miss the ability to express myself in a longer format. While book blogging and Instagram allows me to do that, in a sense, it's not the same. BookTube allows you to connect with other people in different ways than other social media platforms do. Moreover, having a BookTube channel also allows me to, for example, potentially have author interviews in the future. And lastly, I also wanted to push myself a bit and try something new. The next 3 questions are, how old are you? What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living? And congrats. I'm 25 years old and I'm currently a student at the University of Southampton in the UK. I'm currently in my last year of my undergraduate in business management and I'll be doing a master's as well. If everything goes to plan, then I'll be officially graduating in 2023. The next 2 questions are, least favorite fantasy trope? This is an easy one. Without a shadow of the doubt, the insta-love trope. I just can't stand it when characters just fall instantly in love. It's not how the real world works or how people work. And even if you did get an initial crush on someone, you wouldn't just give up everything to be with that person. Love is so much more complex and it's also more beautiful than just instantly falling in love with someone. My second least favorite trope is definitely when a book has a love triangle. I have very rarely seen a love triangle done well. The next question is, how do you find booktubing so far? It's been good. It's been a real learning experience for sure. I didn't really have any editing or graphic design skills before starting my channel, and it's been really challenging but also really rewarding. The booktube community has welcomed me with open arms, which I greatly appreciate. I also love that booktube allows me to share my thoughts in a longer format compared to short Instagram posts. So overall, it's been very good, but it's been also very time consuming. Next question is, best non-SFF book? Historical fiction, comic book, etc. I will cheat slightly here and say 1984 by George Orwell. I know some people would argue that this falls in line with sci-fi, and you could argue that, but wow, that book made a real impact on me. It's definitely a classic I would recommend to everyone. If you want a totally non-related SFF book, then I'll remember loving the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. I read that a long time ago, but I love that series, especially the first book. Best reading conditions. I almost always make myself a hot drink. 80% of the time I make myself a cup of coffee and then sometimes I make myself a cup of tea. I usually prefer reading in bed or on the couch. I also prefer having no sound at all when I read because otherwise I'll just get distracted. I read the first 8 entries in the Wheel of Time and burnt out. Worth picking it back up. My friend, you hit what is called the slog. Book 8 to 10 are infamous for being ridiculously slow and you hit that spot where most people stop reading. The bad news is that it doesn't get much better in the next 1500 or 2000 pages or so. However, if you can get through the slog, then you will notice that book 11 to 14 are paced better and are more enjoyable in every way. Finishing the Wheel of Time will give you one of the most satisfactory feelings, so I would say it's worth it. Maybe try and switch to audio. That's what I did. Is it necessary to read the Wheel of Time books before watching the show? No, but it's helpful as always. The show doesn't do a fantastic job at explaining the magic system and some of the world building. I would always recommend reading the book first, but in this case, I don't really think it matters that much, to be honest. Just do whatever you like. I'm starting to lose my voice. How do you make to keep up with everything you do? You are prolific. Thank you very much for the kind words. I can summarize it in 2 sentences. Being a student and not having any kids. Being a student gives you so much flexibility, which is allowing me to invest a lot of time in book blogging and bookish content. I'm also reasonably good at time management, which is really helpful. Your favorite subgenre in fantasy? That is a good question. I'm definitely a huge fan of epic fantasy. I also love a good coming of age story. I also love having an underdog or a reluctant hero. Also, grimdark is great. If I could only say one favorite subgenre, then I would say epic fantasy, since that basically covers everything. If being a book reviewer and or a booktuber could be your full-time job, would you do it? That's a very good question, and the simple answer is, I don't know. Making what I do as a full-time job is something that is not looking likely at the moment. Although I've grown relatively fast, I still haven't earned any money from doing what I do, except for around £20 from the broken binding from a discount code I have. If doing this as a full-time job ever possibly comes close to being a reality, then I would definitely consider it. It gives you a lot of flexibility, which I love, and reading books for a living sounds great. Obviously, you sometimes hear that having your hobby as a job is not fun, so in short, I don't know, but I would consider it. Is there a particular book that got you into fantasy? Yes, Harry Potter. That was probably my first real experience with fantasy. However, as an adult, The Dark Tower by Stephen King was the first adult fantasy series I read, and that led me to Mistborn, and the rest is history. Would you rather only read series or standalones? Since most fantasy books are part of series, then I would definitely say series. However, I'm not sure if you would consider non-fiction books as being a standalone. Never having the ability to read a non-fiction book again would definitely suck. Have you read The Name of the Wind? Thoughts? No, I haven't, but it's on my TBR. I own this really ugly edition that I found in a charity shop once. I want to read the series, but I'm a bit hesitant since it's unfinished. I have heard great things though. What do you like more in terms of creating and sharing your content? Bookstagram or Booktube? That is a great question. Both platforms definitely have their pros and cons. I would definitely say that it's easier for me to get more reach with less effort on Instagram, which is obviously really nice. However, making a video gives me more satisfaction since I've spent so many hours on it and it feels like a real achievement making a video. I love both platforms, but I'm hoping that I will get better at editing soon because this is taking up a lot of time. At this point in time, it's probably Instagram, only because I made more friends over there, but I love both platforms. Have you always been a reader? My parents would definitely say yes to this. I definitely read way more now than I used to in my teens, but I have always loved books and I love them now more than ever. How do you get your hair so perfect? It's a Viking thing. I can't really explain it. If you could ride any animal into battle, what would it be? Well, pugs are my favorite animals, so probably a pug. That would be pretty badass in my opinion. What trends do you want to see in fantasy in the next 5 years? You're not allowed to say Viking. That is a very interesting question. I really hope that fantasy keeps innovating in the area of creativity. Fantasy isn't a farm boy to hero genre anymore. It's so much more, so I hope we'll continue to see African-inspired, Norse-inspired, Asian and South American-inspired fantasy novels being published. I would also like seeing more good friendships in fantasy. You don't always have to make people fall in love with each other. Friendships are great and needed. Lastly, I hope that fantasy books will continue to try and depict mental health in a more realistic way. Congratulations, thank you. My question, what are some of your main buzzwords or pitches when it comes to wanting to pick up a fantasy book or series? If I hear that a fantasy series analyzes some really interesting themes, or if you have an underdog, then that will usually make me really excited. For example, I really wanted to read The Dreams of the Dying because I heard that it analyzed depression in a fantasy setting. And I'm so glad I did, because this book was fantastic. When it comes to being an underdog, a good example would be Mistborn. Vin is such an underdog and I loved following her story. Also, how beautiful are these covers? Congratulations! If you were asked to select one book and only one book to read for the rest of your life, which one would it be? As a Christian, I would probably say the Bible, but you're probably thinking about a fantasy book. I'll probably say Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erickson. I have read that book once and I didn't understand it. It's probably one of those few books out there that I could reread 10 times and still learn something, so I would choose it only because it seems like a book that has great reread value. If you could read any series again for the first time, which would you pick? Probably Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. It would be very interesting to see if I would still have loved it as much if I read it now as I did for the first time. Having read many more books now, I have a suspicion that I wouldn't love it as much, so that would be really interesting. When and how did you start reviewing books? And congratulations on 1K. Thank you. I started in December 2020. At that point in my life, I had been watching a lot of booktube for almost a year, and I remember I once sat up a late evening and I thought to myself that I would like to become a part of this fantasy book community. I don't really have any close friends that enjoy reading fiction books. However, starting a booktube channel seemed way too ambitious and scary, so I created an Instagram account. I didn't even know there was something called a bookstagram at that point. My wife also had an art page, which kind of gave me that inspiration. Moreover, I could also be anonymous on Instagram. I was a bit scared of what people were going to say if they saw my face on YouTube, hence why I chose Instagram, and I'm so glad I did. It's been a fantastic experience, so thank you guys. What is your favorite book or book series? It's difficult to narrow it down, but The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, the Farsi Trilogy by Robin Hobb, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and The Dark Tower by Stephen King are some of my favorites. I've also read The Way of Kings recently, and I'm expecting the Stormlight Archive to also become one of my all-time favorite series. I think we're gonna call it there. Thank you so much for all the questions. This was really fun. And as stated in the beginning of the video, if you can correctly comment how many questions I answered in this video, then you'll be entering this giveaway for this beautiful signed Illumicrate book. Just look how beautiful this is. Also, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.